Welcome to the X Corner. I'm here adding some mutation to the superhero crew. I'll be covering the X comics for the week of November 7th, 2018. This week we have 4 comics: Iceman number 3, Shatterstar number 2, X23 number 6, and XMen Red number 10. Spoilers, of course. We'll start with Iceman number 3, written by Cena Grace, art by Nate Stockman. Bobby is on a date at a food festival where it happens Firestar and Spider-Man are also on dates. Suddenly, giant ice creature attacks, and the amazing friends team up to take it down. It ends up being a Morlock whom Sinister was controlling. The Morlock gets arrested, and after telling the other Morlocks about it, they guilt Iceman into going to free him. This was a fun team-up that brought back the nostalgia of the 80s cartoon nicely. The art was pretty terrible, though. There's one shot of Firestar that looked like a child drew it. The action scenes were pretty good, but anything else looked very bad. Marvel generic art strikes again. This issue did feel a bit like a stunt, and almost like an annual, except the fact that Sinister sent the monster after Iceman. I'm not really enjoying this series as much as the first, unfortunately. I think Cena Grace used up everything he wanted to say with the characters of substance in that series, and we're getting pretty lackluster normal comic series here. 6 out of 10. Then we have Shatterstar number 2, written by Tim Seeley, art by Carlos Villa, with the flashback scenes by Geraldo Sandoval. Shatterstar has to find his tenants, and he goes to Richter for help. Richter knows of a guy who transports things for people, and now that their teleporter is dead, the bad guys need a ride. Richter insists on coming, and they catch the Dockmaster, opening a portal for Gringrave and her crew, along with their captives. Gringrave and the bad guys escape as Dockmaster and the Longshoremen hold off the heroes. After finishing those guys off, Shatterstar kisses Richter and teleports him away so that he can get his revenge solo. He jumps to the portal before it closes and finds himself on an alien planet controlled by the Grandmaster. The only bad thing I could say about this book is the cheesy, overly dramatic narration by the Grandmaster. It's really annoying. But it's supposed to be, I guess, so I can't hold it against the book too much. What it does, though, is lessen the dramatic sequences of the issue, as we can't take Richter and Shatterstar's relationship too seriously, since we're getting it through the lens of a reality TV show run by the Grandmaster. I think I'd like this comic a lot more if it was played straight. No pun intended. I do like the stylized flashbacks to Shatterstar and Gringrave on Mojo World, and the art in them and the regular story juxtaposed nicely. We get the modern look of the present versus the hyper-stylized 90s art of the flashbacks, and it really does work. Overall, I'm enjoying this comic, despite its best efforts, but I can only give it a 7 out of 10. It could have been much higher if Seeley hadn't attempted to do something with that annoying narration. Next we have X23 number 6, written by Mariko Tamaki, art by Georges Duarte. Gabby and Laura are undercover at a high school. It seems someone is trafficking mutant DNA from there, and they believe it's one of the teachers. Gabby immediately figures out it's one of the students, and she confronts her. The student has a mech which shoots bubblegum. They fight, and Laura shows up to destroy the mech. Gabby throws some of the gum at the little girl, and they recover the DNA. This was so disappointing. It was the epitome of a filler issue. The art isn't very good most of the time, and the story was rushed and made little sense. Why was this kid so smart? And then they just left her there at the end, so what's stopping her from starting up the evil schemes again? It's like they had the idea of Gabby in school and Laura as a mean gym coach, and they tried to shoehorn the story around that. It wasn't even humorous. If you're gonna go for a wacky one-off, at least make it fun to read. 5 out of 10, only because there's a mech in it, and I like mechs. Lastly, we have XMen Red number 10, written by Tom Taylor, art by Paolo Villanelli. Cassandra Nova broadcasts a mutant manifesto as Jean to try and stir up the anti-mutant agenda, and to draw Jean to Genosha to fight. Cassandra has kidnapped a bunch of people, including a Korean helicarrier. She manipulated them to thinking Jean is the enemy, and when the X-Men get there, the Korean army attacks. The X-Men fend them off, and Jean reveals her plan, which Gabby initiated by asking Jean how she would defeat herself. She and the X-Men don Magneto helmets to make them immune to psychic attacks, as do the Atlantean army, who show up to help, as do the Avengers, who'd come to help also. Jean called in the cavalry to stop Cassandra Nova. Thank God this comic was good, because another dud would have hurt me. This whole issue was a build-up for the reveals. First, the idea of everyone wearing Magneto helmets appeals to me, obviously. Then the Atlantean showing up was cool, even if it makes absolutely no sense why Namor is a raving maniac over in Avengers. The editorial staff strike again, especially when you consider the Avengers show up here to team up with them. I guess no one at Marvel thinks that someone could read the X-Men and Avengers comics. So Cassandra Nova is in for an ass-kicking, but I assume she'll have something up her sleeve next issue. I also assume this comic series is running behind schedule, since we're getting the rebooted Uncanny X-Men next week, and this series is still wrapping up. Another fine job by those editors. Fire them all. But anyway, this was a good book. 8 out of 10. Not much happened, but I do like the setup. What a disappointing week. I even started to read the Typhoid Mary X-Men book, but it made no sense and didn't go anywhere, so I abandoned it after a few pages. I'm not sure if it's part of something else, or a mini-series with the X-Men the whole time, and I'll never find out. The main problem I had this week is all these comics have been good, and then they were all let down this week. Especially Iceman and X23. These were so much of fill-in issues that I feel I could have skipped them, and not been affected in any way towards the story. At least XMen Red wasn't bad. Next week, there's only 2 comics, because it's the Uncanny X-Men #1 debut. And we get Domino, so I think it'll be a good week next week, so stay tuned for that. See ya there.